Hi, this is Lauren Schuler, Director of New Leadership and Civic Engagement at the Carl Albert Center and the advisor for Oklahoma Votes. I will be leading you through a voter registration training so you have all the tools to successfully register people to vote at your next event. So, just a little background on who Oklahoma Votes is and what we do. Oklahoma Votes is a student led, nonpartisan organization sponsored by the Carl Albert Center at OU. We focus on voter registration, education, and mobilization efforts on OU's campus. So basically, we focus on all things civic engagement for students. We are creating a civic engagement coalition in hopes of coordinating all activities that relate to civic engagement on campus so students have a one-stop shop on where to go to get the most up-to-date info related to voting. As you can see, here are just a few of the things we focus on currently. This is not an exhausted list, and there are many opportunities for students to make their mark in our organization. Like I mentioned before, it is student-led, and those voices matter. Since I work on campus and advise a student organization, I think it is important to share some background information about why we do this work and how our work is helping to change the voting culture on OU's campus. The numbers that you see before you come from the National Study of Learning, Voting, and Engagement, or NSLVE, NSLVE, which is run out of Tufts University. You can find more information about their work and a list of other universities involved with the study at the link on the bottom right of your screen. So just a little bit about the data that is in front of you. This is kind of a top level view of students from the OU Norman campus and their registration rates, their turnout rates, and the voting rate. So as you can see, we've done some significant work on campus since 2012 to not only increase the number of students that are registered to vote, but also the students that are actually turning out to vote. So you can get more information about our specific numbers and the full printout of all of the different demographics on campus at the bit.ly link located on the bottom left of your screen. The next two slides are some important dates related to voting for 2020. It is important to get this information directly from the state or county election board because other information from the internet or other groups is not always accurate. Take special note of the registration and absentee ballot request deadlines for each election. You don't want to host an event after the registration deadline that is focused on getting people registered to vote when they would not be eligible to vote in the upcoming election. The more you know, the better prepared you will be. It is important to note that the April 7th elections have all been postponed due to COVID-19 and will likely appear on the June 30th election date. But as always, check with the state or county election boards directly for that information. Okay, here is where we start to talk about some of the do's and don'ts of setting up a voter registration event or table. On the left, you will notice the do's, and on the right, you will see some of the don'ts. So for the do's, it is so important to engage people by being friendly and helpful. Remember, you're encouraging voter registration. You're there for them to ask questions so that you can answer them. Please always remember to remain nonpartisan and make sure that you have a plan on where you're keeping the completed forms and when and how you will turn those into the election board. Okay, so for the don'ts, it is really important, back to this comment about remaining nonpartisan. When you're registering people to vote, you are not there to tell them how they should vote or what party that they should register with. So refrain from wearing or displaying any specific party or candidate paraphernalia or gear. Please do not force anybody to register with a particular political party. And do not provide anything of value for registering to vote. So what I mean by that is you can't provide, say, hey, if you come and register to vote, I will give you a slice of pizza. Now, you can have pizza at the table, but it is not a requirement to get the pizza that they register to vote. It is illegal to provide anything of value for registering people to vote. So just make note of that. Also, back to the comment about making sure that you have a plan for what you're going to do with those forms and how you're going to collect them. Don't lose them or hang on to forms because people are counting on you to get them registered. So make sure that you are turning those in an appropriate time frame. Okay, so we're going to talk more about voter registration forms, and typically I like to go through the forms question by question and kind of jump back and forth, but since this is a virtual platform, I'm going to give you some top level information, and then we're going to go to each form directly, and I'll kind of work through them top to bottom. So it is important to look over the forms that are handed into you so they can be checked for errors before folks leave your table or your event. This ensures that everybody who thinks they are getting registered does, in fact, get registered. We are there to help remove barriers for people, not create more. This also makes life easier for workers at the election board, and we like to keep them happy. Okay, so before we move on, just some things to note. Always on both forms, use pen, blue or black ink. No pencil or weird gel-colored pens. Those will not be accepted by the election board. Remember, these forms are official government documents, and we should treat them as such. For the rest of the things that are listed here, we're going to go over those directly on the forms. Okay, so this is normally the part where I would pass out forms to everyone attending, but since this is virtual, as I stated before, you can find the forms in the bit.ly link located in the link on the slide. It will be helpful to follow along with the forms in front of you, as I will reference specific sections on each form during the next few slides. Okay. We're going to go through the Oklahoma forms section by section, and I will highlight some of the typical questions and mistakes people have. So starting at the top, questions 1 through 7 on the top part of the form are to be filled out by everyone completing the form. The information provided in these questions is what the election board will use to register a person to vote for the first time or update an already existing registration. Typical mistakes or questions on this section are on questions 3 through 7. So we'll start there. Question 3 is an either-or question, and a person only needs to fill out their driver's license number or the last 4 digits of their social security number. If they put both, that's okay, but they do not need to. Moving on. Question 4, related to selecting a political party. You will note that independent is not listed on this form. That's because that's our general way of saying a voter is unaffiliated and therefore would select no party. So if someone selects no party on this form, that in turn means that they are registering as an independent. Some people will ask what they should pick here. I never tell a person what party they should pick. I instead tell them that there is a closed primary system in Oklahoma, and that in order to vote in a primary election, they would need to choose a political party. More on this in a later slide, directly related to independence and the nuance there. So, question 4 and 5 are related to your address. I like to think of question 5 as the address where you would like to be registered to vote, because this will determine what districts you live in, what elections you are eligible for, and your polling location. Question 6 would only be different from question 5 if you cannot receive mail at your residence, or if you are a student registering to vote at your permanent residence and would like your voter registration card mailed to you at your school address. To be safe, I like to have people fill out both, even if they are the same. It makes sure that the election board is not confused about what's going on here. Question 7 is the county associated with the address you listed in question 5. People commonly mistake the word county for country and will write USA on this line. If that happens, please have them cross that out, initial, and provide the correct county. If you're unable to have them cross it out and list the new county, they will have to fill out a new form. Okay, moving on. Question 8 in the bottom left-hand part of the form. Please make sure that everyone answers the question, have you been registered before? The rest of this section is reserved for people who have already been registered, and this is where they would list their former information, so the election board can find their information to update their registration status. We will talk more about how to find their voter ID number a little later. But while not required, it is helpful to find this ID and add it to the form for the election board. Moving on. The last box, question 9. In this box, please make sure everyone answers the 2 questions related to age and citizenship at the top of the box. They are often overlooked, but are required. Once everything else is filled out, make sure the person has signed and dated the bottom of the form. As always, making a glance over each form that is handed in to you will help alleviate some of the typical errors that people make when filling out this form. Okay, let's move on to the national form. This form is very similar to the Oklahoma form, but is a standardized form to include all information each state might require when registering people to vote. There is a specific packet of instructions on how to fill this form out for each state, and I will highlight the sections that will differ state to state. You can find that form in the bit.ly link that I referred to earlier. The top part of this form is all that needs to be filled out for new registrations. I've only had a handful of people need to use the bottom, so most of the time you can just disregard that section. You will see that the age and citizenship questions are located right at the top of the form above name. Please make sure these are answered. This form is a little more straightforward for people typically, except for the specific directions for each state. You will see that there are 2 lines for address on this form as well. Box 2 is the address where you are registering, and you only need to fill out box 3 if your mailing address is different from that address. Box 5 is always optional. Box 6 through 8 are the boxes that require you to look up the specific rules for that state. You can find the state-by-state guide in the bit.ly link I shared with the registration forms. It is important to double check these each time. I will show you a sample of those directions on the next slide. Box 9 is just signature and today's date. Some people will put the birth date again here, so please double check. And again, when someone hands you this form, always double check the whole form, make sure that it is complete, all of the questions are answered, and then collect that form. Here are some of the state-by-state directions for how to fill out the national form. Again, this is also located in the bit.ly link where you found the registration forms. Typically, for us, Texas is the most common state we have people requesting to register in. You can see that their ID number requirement is the same as Oklahoma, being either their driver's license number or the last 4 of their social security number. This is the same for most states. However, some states will require a full social security number, so always look up the directions. Texas does not require the selection of a political party because they have open primaries, and they also do not require race or ethnic group. I cannot emphasize this enough, but each state is different. So always, always double check these directions to make sure that you are filling out the form appropriately and that people will be registered in their state. Okay, so we're going to go through some common kind of questions that you'll have or that people may ask when they're filling out the form, or if they see that you're registering people to vote, they may come up and ask some specific questions. So we're just going to go through these top to bottom. Can I register at my on-campus residence hall address? The answer to this is yes. That is considered an address where you can register to vote. So if a student is living on campus and would like to register there, they are absolutely able to do that. If I am registered to vote back home, can I register here too? And typically this is a question that students will ask us. So in that vein, this is a little bit of a trick question. So if you would like to update your voter registration to the current address, so the address that they are living in, say in Norman while attending school, they can do that. But remember that if you're registered in another state, your Oklahoma registration will not purge you from the rolls in your home state automatically. So we just ask that you don't try to vote in two places. That's illegal. Question 3. Do I need to bring my voter ID to vote? In Oklahoma, yes. You need to have an accepted form of identification to vote. I'll provide more information on those IDs on the next slide. If I recently changed party address or name, how can I update my voter registration? You can update your party name and address within the same county in Oklahoma online. So I will explain how to do this and where to find that information on a later slide. But if you are moving to a different county, say from Tulsa County to Cleveland County, you will need to fill out a paper form all over again. Okay, if I am registered as an independent or no party, can I vote in primary elections? Now, this answer is for the state of Oklahoma specifically. So the answer is yes and no. The Democratic Party allows independents to vote in their primary elections. So on election day, you can request a Democratic ballot. You will need to request the ballot. You will not be given it automatically. Only registered Republicans can vote in the Republican primary. So it's clear to make this distinction for people that are registering independent if they ask that question about, what should I do here? Should I pick a party? Should I not? This is where I kind of give them that information about closed primaries, but the Democratic Party does allow independents to vote in their primaries. Okay, how does the absentee ballot process work? So if it's difficult for you to get to your primary polling location on election day, or, you're going to be out of the state, or any number of things that is going to be difficult for you to vote on election day, you may request an absentee ballot. In the state of Oklahoma, we do not require a reason for you to request that ballot. So any person can require that. If people are asking you about other states, it's important to look up each specific state's rules about their absentee ballot process. But in Oklahoma, you can go online to request your absentee ballot. We'll talk a little bit more about where that is in a later slide, so that's coming. But once you receive your absentee ballot in the mail, you'll fill out your ballot. There are directions that they provide with you. And then before you mail it back to the election board, you will need to get it notarized. Okay? So that moves us to the last question here. Where can I get my absentee ballot notarized? Notaries are located at banks, tag agencies, the post office, FedEx stores and UPS stores, etc. Um, if you are on campus and you're looking for, an easily accessible notary for students, you can find a notary in the Carl Albert Center in Manette Hall, room 101. Okay, so voter identification cards. I mentioned earlier that in Oklahoma, you do need to provide a form of identification to vote. Okay, so when you register to vote, you will receive a voter ID in the mail in about 2 to 3 weeks. That's about the processing time that the election board needs to get out your ID. That ID that you get in the mail is considered one of the forms of identification, even though it does not have a photograph on it. It is directly from the election board certifying that you are a registered voter. If you get that voter identification card in the mail and there are errors, like your last name is spelled wrong or the address is not correct, you please report that to your county election board immediately, because that may bar you from being able to vote on election day. If your voter registration application cannot be approved, you will receive a letter in the mail. They typically don't tell you why you weren't able to be approved, but they will send you back a new paper form for you to fill out and mail back to them. So this is why it's really important that you're checking those voter registration forms as you're going through with your events. I'll also make a note that those voter ID cards, like I said, typically come in 2 to 3 weeks. Now, keep in mind that if you're, getting these forms in at the end of the deadline or really close to the deadline, those times may lag. And I'll help on the next slide. I'll kind of share with you how to see very quickly if your status has been changed within the system. So some of the accepted forms of identification in Oklahoma, like I mentioned, that voter ID card that is sent to you directly from the election board, your Oklahoma driver's license, or Oklahoma state issued ID. Out-of-state driver's licenses and IDs are not approved. So if you have a Texas state driver's license, you cannot use that as a form of identification to vote in Oklahoma. Your federally recognized tribal ID card, your passport, and luckily in the state, our OUID is accepted, and that is extended to any of the state run institutions. So our private institution IDs would not be acceptable for students, but any of the ones that are state run would be. So OU, OSU, things like that. So that's really important for our students that have their permanent address outside the state, say Texas, and they only have a Texas driver's license that would not be acceptable. They can use their student ID as an acceptable form of identification. Okay, this is the slide that I have been alluding to over multiple slides. This Oklahoma voter portal is a very, very key tool to have in your back pocket and to let people know that they can utilize for basically all of their voting questions and needs in the state of Oklahoma. So you can find the voter portal at the link okvoterportal.okelections.us. So I've got some screenshots here of what that's going to look like. So when you pull up the voter portal, you're going to see the large picture at the top right of your screen. And what they're going to ask you to do is put your name, first and last, and then your date of birth and say, find me. Okay, so typically what's going to happen if you're registered to vote, you'll click find me, and then it's going to pull up a screen. Okay, the first thing that you're going to see is what what party you're registered with. Your voter ID number will be at the top of that. I did not take a screenshot of that because I did not want to give people my direct information, but that's the first thing that you're going to see. So that's where you'll find that voter ID number to refer back if people are updating their registration on that Oklahoma form. other things that you can do here. So if they find you and they say, yes, here, and it pulls up a screen with all of your information, that means that you are registered to vote. Okay, so that's the good thing. If you don't get your card in the mail or it's lost or something happens, this is a quick way to check and make sure that you are actually registered. Okay, you can find your polling location. So I've shown you a picture here. This is what it will look like. It'll say your polling location, it'll give the address, and then a little Google map for you. You can find sample ballots. Those are typically available on the site about 2 to 3 weeks ahead of any election. These are awesome because you can go in there and say, okay, what elections am I eligible for? You click on it, it will pull up exactly what your ballot is going to look like on that next election date. So what I like to do is I like to pull those up, I print them off, I do all of my research, I mark on those pieces of paper what I'm going to do when I go to my polling location on election day. And that way I have a quick kind of cheat sheet for myself so I don't walk into my polling location blind on that day. So like I said, you can also update your party here, as well as update your address within the same county. So this is just a super handy tool for anybody that's looking at, information related to their status in the state of Oklahoma. I'll also make note that you can see the last picture that I included was, it'll tell you what districts that you're located in and what elections that you will be eligible for. So yeah, super handy tool. Okay, so here's some other quick voter resources that I pulled together. On the left-hand side, you'll see information related to the Oklahoma State Election Board, their office hours, where they're physically located at the state capitol, as well as their mailing address. That would be the address that is listed at the top of the form, for you to mail in things, and then as well as a handy phone number so that you can ask any of your questions directly to them. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see ways to check out if you are registered to vote in any other state other than Oklahoma. So that online voter portal is just for Oklahoma. So if students are registered in other states, they can go to vote.org /am I registered to vote? And they'll ask you the similar thing, name, address, and then birth date. And then they'll pull up information to see if you're registered to vote. The rest of these are kind of just handy places to go find information that they typically do stuff on, candidates. They'll give questionnaires out to candidates and kind of relay their answers back to people in kind of a clear, concise form. They'll do, like the League of Women Voters will do candidate forums. OK Policy typically does great just factual information about the state questions. And then Oklahoma Watch does a typical thing each year. So the last one that I have is for the 2018 elections, but I'm sure that they will be updating their voter guides and things for the 2020 elections as well. And as always, if you have questions related to voting in any kind of capacity, you can go ahead and reach out to Oklahoma Votes, and we'll point you in the right direction. Okay, so Oklahoma Votes is always looking for new members and partner organizations. So this is just some of the ways that people can get engaged with us. We have leadership opportunities. We do info sessions. We'll do trainings. We'll come in person to do, this training, which is a little bit more interactive and helpful for people sometimes. So please reach out to us if you are interested in getting involved in any of those ways. This brings me to kind of the close of the training, but I'm sure you have, many questions after viewing this training, and I'm always happy to answer those directly. I've learned many things over the years from doing this work, but to keep this presentation as succinct as possible, I went over the items that come up most frequently. So in conclusion, here is my contact information that you can direct any of your specific questions related to voting, or if things come up at your events and things like that. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me. If I don't know the answer, I can certainly find the answer for you. Um, so thank you for viewing this training, and I wish you all the success with your voter registration efforts.